In the fall of 1973, in the quiet suburb of Arlington Heights, Illinois, 6 children vanished without a trace in what would become one of the most disturbing unsolved mysteries in American history. The disappearances occurred over just 74 days, leaving a community paralyzed with fear and a case that haunted investigators for decades. But the truth about what really happened to those children, and the 11-year-old girl who somehow connected all the missing, was deliberately buried by local authorities who believed the facts would be too horrifying for the public to bear. Recently unsealed FBI documents have finally revealed the full extent of the nightmare that unfolded in that seemingly perfect American suburb, exposing a darkness that challenges everything we thought we knew about the psychology of children. Before I continue with the chilling details of the Arlington Heights disappearances, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss our explorations into America's most disturbing forgotten histories. And let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Our community spans the globe, united by our fascination with the darker corners of human experience. The story begins with Ellie Blackwood, who moved to Arlington Heights with her father Richard in August 1973 after her mother's death in a car accident in their former hometown of Providence, Rhode Island. Richard Blackwood, a research scientist specializing in childhood development, had accepted a position at the prestigious Arlington Research Institute, hoping the move would give both him and his daughter a fresh start away from the painful memories of their loss. Ellie was small for her age, with long auburn hair and remarkable green eyes that seemed too old for her 11-year-old face. Teachers at Olive Mary Stitt Elementary School described her as exceptionally bright, articulate beyond her years, and unusually composed for a child who had recently lost her mother. What stood out most about Ellie, however, was her immediate popularity. Despite being the new girl in a close-knit suburban community where outsiders typically struggled to find acceptance, Ellie seemed to draw other children to her with an almost magnetic effect. She had this way of knowing exactly what to say to make you feel special, recalled Sarah Jenkins, one of Ellie's classmates who was interviewed for the subsequent investigation. It wasn't just that she was nice. She made you feel like she understood you better than anyone else, like she could see inside your head. This unusual charisma extended beyond Ellie's peer group. Adults in the community found themselves equally charmed by the polite, thoughtful child who spoke with the vocabulary and insight of someone much older. She quickly became a favorite of her teachers, neighborhood parents, and even the elderly residents of the retirement community adjacent to the Blackwoods rental home on North Dunton Avenue. The first disappearance occurred just 6 weeks after Ellie's arrival in Arlington Heights. On October 2, 1973, 8-year-old Peter Callahan failed to return home from baseball practice at Recreation Park. The boy had been last seen walking alone along North Kennicott Avenue around 5:30 p.m., less than half a mile from his home. His baseball glove was found the following morning on the sidewalk near the intersection with Oakton Street, but no other trace of Peter was ever discovered. Detective James Morrow of the Arlington Heights Police Department led the initial investigation. A Korean War veteran with 15 years of law enforcement experience, Morrow approached the disappearance with a methodical thoroughness that had earned him a reputation as the department's most reliable investigator. He organized search parties, interviewed witnesses, and coordinated with neighboring police departments, but the search yielded nothing. It was like the ground just opened up and swallowed that boy, Morrow wrote in his personal case notes, recently discovered among his effects after his death in 2017. No signs of struggle, no witnesses, nothing that would suggest an abduction. Just a baseball glove on the sidewalk as if he had vanished in mid-step. The second disappearance came just 11 days later. 10-year-old Lisa Hernandez disappeared while walking home from the public library on Saturday afternoon. Like Peter, she had been alone, and like Peter, the only trace found was a personal item, in Lisa's case, a red hair ribbon, discovered on a perfectly empty stretch of sidewalk. By the time the third child vanished on October 27th, panic had taken hold of Arlington Heights. 9-year-old Michael Benson disappeared from the playground at Hasbrook Park in broad daylight, apparently while his mother was chatting with another parent less than 50 yards away. Neither adult saw or heard anything unusual, yet Michael was gone when his mother turned to check on him just minutes later. Detective Morrow's investigation took an unexpected turn when he discovered that all 3 missing children shared one connection. They had become friends with Ellie Blackwood. Peter had been partnered with Ellie for a science project. Lisa had been showing Ellie around the library the day she disappeared. And Michael's mother mentioned that her son had been absolutely fascinated by the new girl in his class, talking about her constantly in the weeks before his disappearance. This connection might have remained a coincidence if not for what happened next. During a routine interview with Ellie about her friendship with the missing children, Detective Morrow was struck by the girl's unusual demeanor. While most children her age were frightened by the disappearances, Ellie displayed a clinical interest in the details of the investigation. "Have you found anything unusual about how they disappeared?" she asked Morrow, her green eyes fixed intently on his face. "People don't just vanish without leaving evidence. There's always something left behind, some trace of what happened to them." Her choice of words, clinical, precise, almost professional, unsettled the detective. When he commented that she seemed to know a lot about police work, Ellie smiled and said, "I read a lot of books. And I watch people. You can learn so much just by watching carefully." Morrow noted in his personal journal that evening, "There's something not right about the Blackwood girl. She doesn't react like a child. When she talks about the missing kids, it's with the detachment of someone discussing characters in a book, not real people she knew. I can't put my finger on it, but something about her sets my teeth on edge." His unease deepened when he learned that Richard Blackwood's research at the Arlington Institute focused on what he called psychological pattern recognition in preadolescence, a study of how children develop the ability to identify and predict behavioral patterns in others. When Morrow requested more information about this research, he was told that the details were classified under a government contract. The fourth disappearance broke the pattern. On November 15th, 12-year-old twins Jacob and Emma Sullivan vanished while walking their dog along the bicycle path near Lake Arlington. The Sullivans were not in Ellie's class and had no obvious connection to her. Their disappearance seemed to rule out any direct link between Ellie and the missing children. But Detective Morrow, now following his instincts, discovered that the twins had attended a birthday party at the Arlington Heights Memorial Library 2 weeks earlier, a party where Ellie Blackwood had been a guest. A photograph taken at the event showed the twins in animated conversation with Ellie in the background. By this point, the FBI had joined the investigation, bringing resources that the local police department couldn't match. Agent Robert Cantrell, a specialist in child abduction cases, was assigned as the federal liaison. His first step was to establish a comprehensive timeline of events surrounding each disappearance, including the movements of every adult who had regular contact with the missing children. What emerged was disturbing not for what it revealed, but for what it didn't. There were no suspicious vehicles reported in the areas of the disappearances. No unfamiliar adults had been seen speaking to any of the children. Background checks on school staff, neighbors, and local service workers yielded nothing unusual. The only common thread remained Ellie Blackwood, whose connection to each child grew more evident as the investigation proceeded. The sixth and final disappearance occurred on December 14th. 7-year-old David Mitchell vanished from his front yard while building a snowman after the first significant snowfall of the season. His mother had been watching from the kitchen window, looking away for less than 2 minutes to answer a phone call. When she looked back, the yard was empty except for the half-finished snowman. What made David's disappearance particularly significant was that his house was directly across the street from the Blackwood residence. Later that same day, Detective Morrow obtained a warrant to search the Blackwood home, based on the accumulating circumstantial evidence connecting Ellie to each missing child. The search revealed nothing immediately suspicious. The Blackwood home was meticulously organized, almost sterile in its tidiness. Richard Blackwood cooperated fully, expressing appropriate concern about the missing children and offering any assistance he could provide. Ellie, too, answered questions with the same unsettling composure she had shown throughout the investigation. It wasn't until Morrow noticed a carefully concealed door in Ellie's bedroom closet that the investigation took its dark turn. The door, painted to match the closet wall and fitted with a recessed handle that blended into the woodwork, led to a small finished attic space that had been converted into what could only be described as a laboratory. The room contained a desk with a typewriter, multiple filing cabinets, and walls covered with photographs, maps, and handwritten notes. The photographs were of children from the neighborhood, not just the 6 who had disappeared, but dozens of others, many with notations about their habits, routines, and psychological traits. Subject shows strong attachment to mother figure, read one note beneath a photo of Peter Callahan. Displays heightened fear response to unknown situations. Requires controlled environment for optimal study conditions. The maps detailed the neighborhoods of Arlington Heights, with specific routes marked in red, corresponding to the paths each missing child had taken before disappearing. The filing cabinets contained meticulously organized records, observations of children at play, transcripts of conversations, psychological evaluations written in language far beyond the capabilities of an 11-year-old. Most disturbing were the journals. 7 leather-bound books, each labeled with a child's name, the 6 who had disappeared and one labeled simply Control Subject, contained detailed records of what could only be described as experiments. The writing alternated between a childish script that presumably belonged to Ellie and a more mature, scientific hand that matched samples of Richard Blackwood's writing found elsewhere in the house. Day 17, read an entry in Peter Callahan's journal. Subject continues to demonstrate remarkable adaptability to isolation. Decreased food intake has resulted in expected psychological effects. Subject now engages in conversations with non-existent entities and shows signs of temporal disorientation. Father says this confirms his theory about environmental triggers for latent schizophrenic patterns in prepubescent subjects. The journal suggested that the Blackwoods, father and daughter working as a team, had been abducting children for an ongoing research project related to Richard's work at the Arlington Institute. The entries detailed a systematic approach to the selection, abduction, and processing of each child, with Ellie playing the crucial role of gaining the victim's trust before leading them to carefully planned abduction sites. But the most horrifying revelation was yet to come. When FBI agents expanded the search to the basement of the Blackwood home, they discovered a hidden room behind a false wall. Inside was evidence that the missing children had not just been studied, but subjected to a series of psychological experiments designed to test the limits of childhood emotional resilience. The basement laboratory contained 6 small chambers, each equipped with observation windows, recording devices, and environmental controls that could alter temperature, light, and sound. 5 of the chambers showed evidence of recent occupation, personal items belonging to the missing children, bedding, food containers. The 6th chamber was in the process of being prepared, presumably for David Mitchell. The children themselves were gone. According to notes found in Richard Blackwood's desk, once each subject had reached the threshold of psychological breaking, a point that had been meticulously documented in the journals, they were processed and relocated to secondary research facilities for what was described as long-term observation of post-traumatic developmental patterns. Richard and Ellie Blackwood had disappeared by the time the warrant was executed. A nationwide manhunt ensued, but the father and daughter seemed to have vanished as completely as the children they had abducted. Bank records showed that Richard had withdrawn large sums of money in the weeks leading up to the search, suggesting a planned escape. What followed was perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the entire case. Within days of the discoveries at the Blackwood home, federal agents arrived in Arlington Heights and took control of the investigation. Local police, including Detective Morrow, were removed from the case. The evidence from the Blackwood home was confiscated, and a cover story was released to the press indicating that the disappearances remained unsolved but were believed to be the work of a transient child predator who had likely moved on to another area. For decades, the truth about the Arlington Heights disappearances remained buried in classified files. It wasn't until a Freedom of Information Act request in 2015, followed by 3 years of legal battles, that portions of the FBI's records were finally unsealed. Even then, significant sections remained heavily redacted. What emerged from these documents painted a picture even more disturbing than the initial discoveries suggested. Richard Blackwood hadn't been merely a research scientist. He had been part of a classified government program investigating childhood psychological development with potential applications in intelligence operations. His move to Arlington Heights hadn't been coincidence but a planned relocation after similar incidents in Providence had threatened to expose his work. Most shocking of all was the revelation about Ellie. According to the redacted files, Eleanor Blackwood wasn't Richard's biological daughter but a subject from an earlier phase of his research, a child who had been systematically conditioned from infancy to assist in his work. The death of her mother had been fabricated as part of their cover story. The real Eleanor Blackwood, the document suggested, had died years earlier under circumstances that remained classified. The girl known as Ellie was described in the files as Subject Alpha, the first successful outcome of a program designed to create what was clinically termed juvenile assets with advanced psychological manipulation capabilities. In layman's terms, she had been engineered to become the perfect lure for other children, able to identify psychological vulnerabilities and exploit them with uncanny precision. The 6 children of Arlington Heights were not the first victims of this program, nor, the file suggested, were they the last. References to similar collection operations in other American suburbs appeared throughout the documents, with project names and locations redacted. Detective James Morrow never gave up his personal investigation of the case, even after being officially removed from it. His retirement in 1985 allowed him to pursue leads without the constraints of his former position. For 3 decades, he tracked reports of missing children across the country, looking for the distinctive patterns he had first identified in Arlington Heights: children who disappeared without witnesses, a new child in the community shortly before the disappearances, and the involvement of a researcher or academic at a nearby institution. Morrow compiled his findings in a manuscript titled The Collectors, which was found among his possessions after his death. The manuscript detailed his theory that Richard Blackwood and Ellie were part of a larger network of similar teams, operating in suburbs across America under the protection of classified government programs. The final entry in Morrow's manuscript, dated just weeks before his death, described his discovery of what he believed to be Ellie's current identity, a psychology professor at a prestigious East Coast university, specializing in childhood trauma and resilience. The woman he identified had the same distinctive green eyes as the girl he remembered from 1973, though she would now be in her 50s. When he attempted to approach her at an academic conference, he noted that she recognized him immediately, though they had not seen each other in over 40 years. "She smiled at me across the room," he wrote, "the same smile I remember from our interviews in 1973. Not the smile of a child, but of someone who knows exactly what you're thinking and how to use it against you. She didn't run or show any sign of concern. Instead, she approached me directly and said, 'Detective Morrow, I've been wondering when you would find me. We have so much to talk about.'" The manuscript ends there. 2 days later, James Morrow was found dead in his home from what the coroner ruled a heart attack. His research materials, including any evidence of the woman's identity, were missing from his study. The Arlington Heights disappearances remain officially unsolved. The 6 children, Peter Callahan, Lisa Hernandez, Michael Benson, Jacob and Emma Sullivan, and David Mitchell, were never found. Their case files remain open but inactive, their faces frozen in time in school photographs that still hang in the community room of the Arlington Heights Police Department. What happened in that quiet Chicago suburb in the fall of 1973 represents more than just an unsolved mystery. It raises profound and disturbing questions about the nature of evil in childhood, about government research that crosses ethical boundaries, and about how many other communities might have experienced similar horrors without ever knowing the truth. If the unsealed documents are to be believed, the girl called Ellie Blackwood demonstrated that the most dangerous predators may not be the strangers we're taught to fear, but the children who have been systematically stripped of their humanity and turned into something that exists in the uncanny valley between innocence and calculated malevolence. The most chilling aspect of this case isn't just what happened to those 6 children, but the possibility that similar operations may have continued for decades afterward, with other Ellies moving through American suburbs, identifying vulnerable children, and disappearing with them into a shadow world of classified research that remains hidden from public scrutiny. So the next time a new family moves into your neighborhood, and their unusually composed child seems to know exactly what to say to make your children feel understood in a way no one else can, remember the lessons of Arlington Heights. Sometimes the monster isn't hiding under the bed or in the closet. Sometimes it's sitting at your dinner table, smiling with perfect politeness as it decides whether your child would make a suitable subject. If you've made it this far, you're now one of the few people who know the true story of what happened in Arlington Heights in the fall of 1973. Don't forget to subscribe to hear more untold stories from America's secret history. Hit the like button if you found this disturbing, and share with someone who appreciates the darker truths that conventional history tries to hide. Until next time, remember to look carefully at the children around you. Not all monsters have grown-up faces. Tell us in the comments, have you ever encountered a child who seemed somehow wrong in ways you couldn't explain? Or have you heard of similar cases in your hometown? Our community thrives on these shared experiences, and sometimes the connections we make reveal patterns that official history has tried to erase.